You're standing in line at the grocery store, and there are three people behind you. You just swiped your card for a basic bag of essentials, maybe some eggs, bread, a gallon of milk. And for those 3 seconds while the screen says processing, your chest goes tight, your face feels hot. It's not that you're broke, you have a job, you worked 40 hours last week, but you're not entirely sure if that one unexpected subscription or that utility bill hit your account this morning. That half second of pure localized panic where you wonder if the machine is going to beep and reject you in front of everyone. That's not just a budget issue. That's your brain trapped in a cycle of financial fight or flight. My name is Adam, and I'm obsessed with the survival mode brain chemistry that keeps us broke and why reaching a single financial milestone is the only way to turn that midnight anxiety into actual breathing room. Look, here's the thing that most financial experts completely miss. They want to show you spreadsheets, they want to talk about compound interest tables and the magic of 7% returns, but they're talking to your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, while your amygdala is screaming because you're in what I call financial survival mode. When you're in this mode, your body chemistry is literally altered. Your body is flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. Evolutionarily, cortisol was meant to help you run away from a saber-toothed tiger. It shuts down long-term thinking so you can focus on immediate survival. But in 2026, the tiger is your rent and the jungle is your bank account. You can't build wealth when your brain thinks you're being hunted. You become reactive, fear-based, and prone to making impulsive decisions just to get a quick hit of dopamine to mask the dread. Contrast that with wealth building mode. This is a proactive, opportunity-based state of mind that only becomes accessible when you stop living in a state of constant biological emergency. But to get there, we have to identify the 5 invisible forces that are keeping your brain locked in that survival loop. Let's start with the most dangerous wealth killer of all, and honestly, it's probably sitting in your pocket right now. High-interest debt is like having a financial parasite that grows stronger every single month you choose to ignore it. We're talking about credit cards, personal loans, or those buy now, pay later apps that have become the digital equivalent of a payday lender. This stuff doesn't just cost you money, it costs your mental bandwidth. Here's the brutal math that the banks spend billions on marketing to make sure you never actually calculate. The average credit card interest rate has climbed to over 22% recently. If you're carrying a $10,000 balance, you're paying roughly $2,200 annually just in interest. That's nearly $200 a month vanishing into thin air without reducing your balance by a single penny. But look, it gets so much worse. If you decide to just pay the minimum, you'll be making payments for over 30 years and end up paying more than $32,000 total for that original $10,000. You literally bought the same items 3 times over and you gave the extra 2 versions to a billion-dollar bank as a gift. The psychological cost of this debt is what keeps you in survival mode. It creates a debtor's fog. When you owe money at 22%, your brain knows on some level that you're losing. It creates a sense of helplessness. You start to feel like no matter how hard you work, the system is rigged. And here's the kicker. That feeling leads to more spending. It's called doom spending. Your brain is so stressed by the debt that it seeks a dopamine hit from a new purchase just to feel okay for 10 minutes, which leads to more debt. It's a closed loop of biological and financial destruction. To move into wealth-building mode, you have to treat high-interest debt like a house fire. You don't manage a house fire, you put it out with everything you've got so you can finally stop the cortisol drip and start thinking clearly again. The second wealth killer is something that's happening to your money right now, whether you're paying attention or not. Inflation is the silent thief that makes everything you need more expensive while making your hard-earned savings worth less. Most people treat inflation like the weather, something that just happens to them. But wealthy people understand that ignoring inflation is like ignoring a slow leak in your boat while you're miles from shore. It starts small, but over time, it's the reason you sink. Consider this reality check. A few years ago, a decent lunch might have cost you $10. Today, that same meal is probably $16 or $18. Your weekly grocery bill that used to be $80 is now closer to $130. These aren't just temporary price hikes. This is the value of your labor being eroded in real time. The Federal Reserve targets about 2% inflation annually, which sounds manageable until you look at the compound effect. At 2%, your money loses half its purchasing power every 35 years. But in the real world, the things we actually need, healthcare, education, and housing, often inflate much faster than the official Consumer Price Index suggests. If you're keeping significant amounts of money in a standard checking account earning 0.01% interest, you are mathematically guaranteed to get poorer every single day. Your brain feels safe seeing that number in the bank, but that's a survival mode illusion. True safety in wealth building mode comes from owning assets that outpace inflation. The wealthy don't hoard cash, they hoard productive assets. They understand that cash is a melting ice cube, and the only way to keep your cool is to move that value into stocks, real estate, or businesses that can raise their prices as the currency devalues. This brings us to the third wealth killer, and it's probably the most frustrating because it's 100% self-inflicted. Staying on the sidelines when it comes to investing is like watching a train leave the station while you're standing on the platform with a valid ticket in your hand. You have everything you need to build wealth, but fear, procrastination, or some misguided sense of caution keeps you from taking action. Look, the market is volatile. It's scary. The headlines are always screaming about a crash or a bubble or a recession. But despite all the noise, the market has trended upward for a century. The average person finds every excuse to avoid participating in this wealth-building machine. They say the market is too high, forgetting that the market spends the majority of its time near all-time highs because the economy generally grows. Then when the market drops, they say it's too risky and wait for stability. Here's the thing about stability. By the time the market feels stable, the gains have already been made. There's a sobering reality in the data. If you missed just the 10 best days in the market over a 20-year period, your total returns would be cut in half. Think about that. 10 days. The problem is that those best days almost always happen right in the middle of the scariest times. Your survival mode brain sees a market crash and says run, hide, keep the cash, but your wealth building mode brain says sail. Staying on the sidelines isn't being careful, it's a slow motion disaster. You're trading the temporary feeling of safety for the permanent reality of being broke in your 60s. You have to train your brain to embrace the discomfort of volatility because that discomfort is the price of admission for long-term freedom. The fourth wealth killer is perhaps the most socially acceptable form of financial self-sabotage, and it's called lifestyle inflation. This is the process where your spending automatically increases to match your income, ensuring that you never actually get ahead no matter how much you earn. It's the reason why you know people making $250,000 a year who are just as stressed about their mortgage as someone making $50,000. Here's how the trap works. You get a raise or a better job, and suddenly you feel like you deserve a nicer apartment. You upgrade your wardrobe because you need to look the part. You start eating at more expensive restaurants because your peers do. Each individual decision seems completely reasonable, but collectively, they consume every extra dollar you earn. The insidious part about lifestyle inflation is that it feels like progress. Your friends and family see your new car or your bigger house and they congratulate you. They think you're making it. But behind the scenes, you've just increased the burn rate of your life. You've made yourself more fragile. If you're making more but saving the same percentage, you aren't actually wealthier. You're just a more expensive version of broke. This creates a psychological phenomenon called the hedonic treadmill. You get a temporary hit of dopamine from the upgrade, but then you adapt. The fancy apartment becomes the new normal. The expensive clothes become just clothes. But the bills are permanent. You've essentially given yourself a pay cut disguised as an upgrade. The wealthy think differently. They increase their standard of living slowly and deliberately, always ensuring that their wealth-building mode is funded first. They understand that the goal isn't to look rich, it's to be free. Now, let's talk about the fifth wealth killer, and this one might sting a little because it's probably sitting in your driveway right now. Cars are depreciating assets disguised as necessities, and the way most people buy them is financial suicide. We've been conditioned to see cars as extensions of our personality, symbols of our success, and rewards for our hard work. But from a wealth-building perspective, they are nothing more than money pits on wheels. The average new car loses 20% of its value in the first year. You're literally paying interest on an asset that is actively trying to reach a value of zero. The average car payment in America is now over $700 per month. If you're making that payment, you aren't just losing $700, you're losing what that $700 could have become. Here's the math that the dealership hopes you never do. If instead of making a $700 car payment, you invested that money in a simple index fund, you'd have over $800,000 after 30 years. You're literally trading a multi-million-dollar retirement for a piece of metal that will be in a junkyard in 15 years. But look, it's not just the math, it's the status trap. We use cars to signal to people we don't even know that we have money that we actually just spent on the car. It's a paradox of survival mode thinking. We want the social safety of being perceived as successful, so we sacrifice the actual safety of having capital. The person driving the 8-year-old Toyota who has $200,000 in a brokerage account is in wealth building mode. The person in the brand new $80,000 SUV with a $1,200 monthly payment is in survival mode, whether they realize it or not. One job loss, one health scare, and that success symbol becomes an anchor that drags them under. These 5 wealth killers work together in a devastating synergy. High-interest debt prevents you from having the capital to invest. Inflation erodes what little you do save. Staying on the sidelines ensures you never benefit from growth. Lifestyle inflation eats your raises, and car payments drain your monthly cash flow. Most people fall victim to all 5 simultaneously, which explains why building wealth feels like an impossible mountain to climb. But here's the encouraging part. Once you recognize these patterns, you can start making different choices. You can decide right now to stop being a middleman for the banks and start being an owner of the economy. You don't need a complex strategy or a secret tip from a hedge fund manager. You just need to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. The secret to moving from survival mode to wealth building mode is hitting that first $100,000 milestone. Why $100,000? Because that's where the math shifts. When you have $100,000 invested, a 7% return is $7,000 a year. That's nearly $600 a month of free money generated by your capital. At that point, your money is working as hard as a part-time job. That's when the midnight anxiety starts to fade. You stop worrying about the grocery store card reader because you know you have a fortress of capital behind you. You stop being a prey animal and start being a predator of opportunity. Look, money isn't the most important thing in life, but it affects every single thing that is. It affects your health, your time, your ability to help your family, and your peace of mind. Every financial decision you make is a vote for the life you want to live. Stop voting for survival and start voting for freedom. The 5 invisible forces are only powerful if you let them stay invisible. Now that you see them, you have the power to kill them. See you in the next video.